All right, it is the quarter of the hour. Welcome to the last session of track one of day one of the Evergreen Conference. My name is Susan Morrison. I'm from the Georgia Public Library Service, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Show Me the Money, Patron Bills in Evergreen, presented by Michele Morgan from Noble. So before we get started, I'd like to thank our champion sponsors, the Evergreen Collaborative Development Initiative, or ECDI, Equinox Open Library Initiative, Unique Management, Midwest Tape, and Stat Courier. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and there's also options for closed captioning. So I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, Michele.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, get organized here. Okay, well, thank you everybody for sticking with this for the end of the first day session. I'm going to talk about patron bills in Evergreen. My name is Michele Morgan. I work for Noble, the North of Boston Library Exchange, and in my early days, I spent a lot of time behind the circ desk and being a circ supervisor, so kind of familiar with the money thing. So first, I want to jump right in and take a look at the patron bills interface. The current interface in Evergreen, the patron interface, I popped right over to the bill screen, and this is what it looks like. My screenshots all came from a test Evergreen system using the very basic Concerto database that you can load when you load a system to play around with in Evergreen. It's got a few patrons that owe a little bit of money and a small big database. Greg Adam Jones is my patron of choice because he owes a reasonable amount of money to play with. So when we're looking at the interface in the current patron screen, the bills tab is here. It shows the amount that the patron owes, and it's got some details on the top, the total owed, the total bill. This patron hasn't paid anything on these bills yet, so this is zero. And everything else is pretty much zero because he hasn't paid anything. Down here on the bottom, you see the billings that he owes. You can select them individually or select all of them. And this section here shows the amount that's owed for selected bills. Right now, everything is selected. So it's the total that shows. These columns you can change through the little gear here, and you can set defaults for number of rows and page through if there's a lot of bills. This is where you make the payments. We're going to go through that workflow in a little bit. So right now I'm going to go to the next screen. If I choose one of these bills, one of the actions that I have is something called full details. And if I do that, I can get a different view of the one bill other than that little row. I can get a statement that says it has information on the transaction up here that the bill is connected to. And down here is a summary of the amount that's owed on the bill and total down here. There's another tab here called details. And if I look at that, it gives me more details on the transaction. The information on the top is pretty much the same. But down here, I can see that the bills are all these 10-cent fines that the patron has accrued for keeping the item overdue. If I had any payments, they would show down here. And again, we have our regular Evergreen grid where we have a gear where we can change our settings if we need to. In Evergreen, there is also an experimental angular circulation page. The circulation screens have been rewritten in Angular, and they are in review by the Evergreen community to become the new circulation screens. So I just wanted to show what those look like in the new interface. So this is the patron bills screen in the new interface. Notice that the tabs and options have moved from the top to the left sidebar, and the information that was on the left sidebar has now moved to the top of the screen. Oh, and I should have mentioned that I have the patron record collapsed so that we can see more of the bill screen. There's a little arrow here that would open that up and give more patron information. Okay, so this is the bill screen here, the transactions that he owes bills for down here. The payment option is across the middle, but the options are pretty much the same. And if I look at the full details, here's my statement. The information in the middle is pretty much the same. The navigation and the patron information has switched places. And again, the full details on that transaction, pretty much the same information as we saw in the current interface. Okay, so I'm going to look at the workflow for paying bills. Excuse me for a second. Apologies, allergies. Okay, so the basic payment workflow is you're on the bill screen, you select your charges, you choose your payment type, you enter the payment received that the patron is going to give you, and you have a few options. One is to annotate, which means you can add a note to the payment if there's some information that is important for that payment. You have the option of printing a receipt for that payment. And there's also an option to print multiple copies of the receipt, which could be useful. I know one of our libraries, when they take a payment for a lost item, they always print 2 copies, one for the patron, one for the library. So that's a handy option to have. So when you've selected all your options for the payment, you click the Apply Payment button. And now I'm going to throw a screen at you with all the arrows in the places. So here's where you select your transaction to pay. Choose your payment type up here, enter your amount here. Here's the annotate option, the option to print a receipt and the number of copies. And I didn't take the screenshot of this checked, but I actually did check it because I wanted to show you what pops up. So the last thing you do is hit Apply Payment. If you've chosen to annotate, you get this box, and you can put in your note here. So when the payment is complete, notice the bill that the patron owed, that 70 cents. I used to have 4 rows down here. I now have 3. The patron no longer owes that 70 cents, so it disappears from the screen, and the total owed has gone down accordingly. So you might wonder what happened to that payment and can I ever see it again? You can look at the patron's bill history. There was a button right there. So if you do that, you get a screen that looks like this. And this screen has 2 tabs. It has a transactions tab and a payments tab. And each of those tabs has a date range that you can configure. So there are no transactions showing on this screen, and that's because the transaction I paid isn't within this date range. So how am I going to see it? I don't know when the transaction happened, but I do know when the payment happened. So if I click on the payments tab, it should show there because it happened within this time period. So this is my 70 cents that I just applied to the patron record. This is the note that I added when I annotated the payment. And if I select the payment and look at the full details again, you can see a lot of this information is the same. The item stuff is the same. But these numbers have changed. I was still billed 70 cents, but I now have a total paid or credited of 70 cents, and I don't owe any more money. So the payment is listed down here on the statement. And the balance owed is 0, and the total charges and total payments are shown here. And if I look at the details of that transaction, I can see all this billing information is the same, but down here my payment shows. And up here all the numbers have been adjusted accordingly. So that was a full payment. I just wanted to show a partial payment. And that's going to lead us to some other interesting things. So for the other 70 cents that this patron owes, I'm going to select that one. And instead of paying the whole thing, I'm only going to pay 30 cents of it. So when I apply that payment, I may or may not have annotated it. I think I didn't. And here I went directly to the transaction detail screen where I can see the bill that I paid was 30 cents, not the 70 cents. And up here it shows my total bill of 70 cents, 30 cents paid, and there's still a 40 cent balance due. So this transaction is still going to show on the patron's bills screen because there is still money owed on it. Okay, now I'm going to talk about voiding bills. And if anybody has questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat. I wanted to show voiding bills after that partial payment. Because voiding is I find voiding to be an interesting, interesting process. So the idea of voiding a bill is to make it like the bill never happened. An example is a patron gets billed for an overdue item, but somehow it slipped by the circ desk. It got found on the shelf. And the patron has fines, but the patron never should have accrued those fines because they actually did return the book. So I'm going to go back to this is a little snippet of the bill screen where it shows my, excuse me, my transactions. And if I select a transaction and go under the Actions menu, I have a Void All Billings option. And that may be appropriate for the situation where the item was found on the shelf. It does get problematic if some of the bill has been paid. So that's the example I'm going to show you. I didn't show you the simple one. I'm showing you the complicated one. So if I choose to void the billings here, this billing will be voided. Another way to void billings, and I actually think this is more common in terms of how billings get voided, is the amnesty check-in. Amnesty check-in will void billings. So to void this billing, I'm actually going to check the item in. And when I do that, this is the item that accrued the bill, and I checked it in with amnesty mode on, and I've got this fine tally of minus 30 cents, which is interesting. So if I go back to my full details on that transaction, here's my statement. It's showing my billing, it's showing my payment of 30 cents, but now it's showing a void. I did an amnesty check-in and it voided the whole 70 cents. So now that means the balance on my transaction is minus 30 cents. So technically I owe that patron 30 cents. That may be appropriate for the way your library does things, but we find that it doesn't always make sense. if I look at the details of that one transaction, down here, these fields, voided and voiding staff member, are filled in. So I checked it in as the admin user in amnesty mode. So I voided the bill, and now total billed is 0 because the bill has been made like it never happened. $30.30 was paid, so now the balance is negative 30 cents. So now I want to talk about, hopefully to make this clearer, the billable transaction, which I think deserves a fancy font. I wanted to try and explain how Evergreen handles these payments and billings. So a billable transaction, a circulation is a billable transaction, but not every billable transaction is a circulation. A booking can be a billable transaction, as well as a manual billing, which is when you're on a patron record, you can apply a bill to the patron record. So a billable transaction is a transaction associated with the patron that can have bills and payments associated with it. And this is how Evergreen looks at billable transactions. So the patron checked out a book or had a manual bill assigned. This example is more like a book overdue. They checked out a book, they kept it overdue, they started accruing fines. So what Evergreen does is it has this transaction and it hangs the billings and the payments both off of this transaction. And the way it figures out the balance owed is to add all the bills and subtract all the payments. So if we look back at our full payment, this was our transaction with the ID of 14. That's how the transaction is identified. That number is unique. So it had 7 billings of 10 cents that come up to 70 cents, and we paid 70 cents. So our balance owed is 0. For the partial payment, it still has the same billings of 70 cents, but we only paid 30 cents. So our balance owed is 40 cents. So when I voided that billing by checking it in amnesty mode, these billings were negated. They're no longer going to be considered as billings. So when Evergreen adds up the billings and payments, all it's got is that 30-cent payment. So it subtracts the 30 cents from no billings, and we get the negative 30 cents. Okay. So let's talk about overdue fines. How do overdue fines happen? Overdue fines get assessed as a result of the way your circulation policies are configured. In the Concerto system, there is one circulation policy for the whole system. It's for the consortium, which is the whole system, and it uses the duration rules, recurring fine rules, and max fine rules that are all called default. So the recurring fine rule determines how much in fines is charged and at what interval. So for this rule, the patron would get charged 5 cents, 10 cents, or 50 cents a day, depending on how the item is configured. So every day the patron would get, in our situation, it was 10 cents. So every day the patron would get charged 10 cents for the time that they kept it overdue. The max fine rule says a max fine amount of $5, and I apologize, this is a little small. But the max fine amount is $5. That means the system is going to charge 10 cents every day the item is overdue, but when it gets to $5, it's going to stop because we have that max fine amount. So what puts these fines on the patron's record? There is a script that runs on Evergreen systems. Generally, it runs nightly, and it processes all the transactions and adds the fines based on the circulation policy. So every night it will go through, oh, this item's still overdue. I'll add another 10-cent fine to that patron record. The fine generator also runs when you check in an item, and that doesn't really matter for items that get fined daily, but if your library does any hourly loans and charges fines hourly, you could check in an item that has hourly fines and they would all accrue at check-in. It's probably not terribly common. Okay, so that's the fine generator. So unless there are questions, I'm just going to keep going on to my next topic, but please feel free to add questions.
There was a question in chat about getting
Yes.
to amnesty mode. So I did let Elizabeth know that it's a check-in modifier option on the check-in screen, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything about amnesty mode.
No, that pretty much covers it. Yeah, the check-in, it is a check, as Susan said, the check-in modifier is on the check-in screen. It's in a little drop down in the lower right-hand corner, and it does stay on until you turn it off. It's one of those settings that is sticky. And we saw that there was a red banner across the top letting you know that amnesty mode is on. We can take a look at that later if we have time. So I did want to go on to lost and long overdue items. So there are two situations, well, it's probably more than two, but there are two general situations where items can become lost and long overdue. A patron could come in and tell you that they lost a book that they had borrowed. They don't know what happened to it and they want to pay for it. So if you're looking at the patron records, I'm on the items out screen, and the patron comes in and they say, I've lost this piano concerto book and I want to pay whatever I owe for it. So what you can do is select it, and under actions, there is a mark lost option. And if I choose that, what that will do is cause Evergreen to take the cost of the item and apply it as a bill to the patron record. Now, there are lots of options around what that amount is and what it does to fines in that case, and we'll look at some of those later. But basically, marking an item lost is going to charge the patron for the item. And if the patron is standing in front of you wanting to pay, that would put the bill on their bill screen, which you could then go over to and pay like any other overdue fine. The other way items can be marked lost or long overdue, which is a very similar process with a different name and connotation. The system can automatically mark items lost or long overdue depending on how long they have been checked out. These are action triggers in the Evergreen system. These are the same processes that send overdue notices to patrons. But in this case, what it's doing, this top one here is called a 6-month long overdue notice. And that's something that's going to be sent out when this second event happens, which is the 6-month overdue, mark long overdue. And what this does is daily, or however often this gets run in the background by the system, you don't have to think about it. The system will look for things that are 6 months overdue and have not been returned and decide that they need to be marked long overdue or lost to put the bill on the patron record automatically. This interval is determined by policy. It's pretty much when you decide that the book is probably not going to be coming back. So you bill the patron for it. Okay, I'm going to move on to another type of bill, manual bills, which were previously known as grocery and probably still appear as grocery in many places. But essentially, it's a bill that is applied to a patron record by a staff member. It's not because they checked something out and it became overdue. There was a certain thing that happened that the system doesn't account for, so the staff member has to assess the bill. So this can be added. I'm back on the patron bills screen. This bill patron button will allow you to add a manual bill. And when I click it, I'll get this pop-up. I'm at BR1, that's my location. So that's where the bill is, that's the location that the bill belongs to. The billing type is MISC, as in miscellaneous. You can enter an amount and a note. And this is an example of a printing fee. The patron printed some documents and they owe $5 for that. So when you click submit bill, that bill is going to show with their other billings. And I don't actually think I took a screenshot of it, but it would show as another row here on the bill screen. But now I'm going to go on to billing types, some of which we've looked at and talked about, and others that we haven't yet. So overdue materials, these are all the, back up a second. These are all the billing types that come with Evergreen. Overdue materials are those daily overdue fines, those 10 cents that we saw. Lost materials are when an item that's checked out to a patron is marked lost, and the bill for the item is applied to the patron record. Optionally, there can be a processing fee also applied when an item is marked lost. We'll look at some options later. Damaged item is another billing type. If a patron brings back an item, but they left it out in the rain or something, it has to be marked damaged, you can optionally charge the patron the bill for the item at that point, and also a processing fee if you choose. And similar to lost, long overdue is the same idea. There's a long overdue materials billing type as well as a processing fee. And then MISC is that other billing type that we just did by putting a manual bill on the patron record. There are a few less common billing types that come with the system. I'm not terribly familiar with them because we've never used them, but I suspect if you're a library that uses collections, that's what the collection fee is for. And if anybody actually does use these, feel free to chat in. The system can have some circulations as deposit circulations, meaning the patron has to put a monetary deposit to check something out. And it can also do rentals. So there are those billing types. And I really have no idea what a notification fee is, but it's there. So I put it on the list. The nice thing is you can do custom billing types in Evergreen. If you are a user that has permission to do it, you can add a custom billing type for your library. So here is the place where it's done. It's done under, I believe it's under server administration. And the option is billing type. These are the billing types that came with the system that we talked about. But I do have a new billing type option. And if I click on that, I can add one. I decided, since patrons do a lot of printing in my library, I'm going to add a printing fee billing type so I don't have to fill that in every time I apply that bill. It's associated with my library. I'm at BR1. If I wanted to, I could put a default price. Probably doesn't make sense for printing fee, but if you had a standard price for something, you could put the default price in this, and then when you apply the bill, you don't even have to put the amount that would be supplied. So when I save that, now this printing fee appears in the list of billing types in the system. And when I am on the patron record and I choose to bill the patron, my drop-down shows that printing fee. Okay, moving right on to payments. So there are payment types also. Common payment types are cash payment, check payment. It gives you a place to record a check number if you do that. Credit and debit card payments. Those are most commonly used with an external payment processor. We use Stripe, which works well for us. Forgive payment is a choice that you have, and the expectation is that you're not going to get money for that. You decided they're not going to be responsible for that payment, so you can forgive it. There's also a goods payment and a work payment, which are similar. You're not going to get money for those, but if you're a library that does food for fines, you might want to use the goods payment type for that. If you want to have a patron do some shelving of books, you could pay their bills with a work payment. A couple of other payment types are the credit payment. Now that is when a patron is paying a bill, say the patron was paying the 70-cent bill that we paid earlier, and they gave us $1, so they're owed 30 cents in change. There is an option to take that 30 cents and make it a credit on the patron record so that it could be used to pay another fine later on. If your library does that, you would apply that saved credit as a credit payment. We'll talk about options later that let you disable that. And then the other important payment type is the account adjustment, and that is a payment type that is used by the system to zero out balances that patrons owe. So I'm going to talk about that for a moment. There is an option to adjust to zero in Evergreen. So I went back here to my transaction where I had paid 70 cents. I'm sorry, I owed 70 cents and I paid 30 cents and I still owed 40 cents. And previously I had voided that transaction and we saw that it ended up with the patron owing minus 30 cents, meaning that they were owed 30 cents. So if I had handled that transaction in a different way, if I had selected it and chosen this adjust to zero option, let's see. Then I go back to my details. Notice the balance due now is 0. And down here, I have these 10-cent adjustment payments, count adjustments they're called. And that's the system applying those account adjustments to make the balance 0. This is one way to avoid negative balances if they don't work well for you, for your library system. Okay, I'm going to go on to library settings. There are a lot of library settings that control how patron billings and payments work. This one we just talked about, disable patron credit. This takes away the ability to add change as a credit to the patron record. So if you don't want to deal with those credit payments and holding money for the patron in Evergreen, you can disable that entirely. This option controls how what displays when you first retrieve a patron record where the patron owes a bill. Normally you'd You'd retrieve your patron record, and if there's no block that pops up, the system will put you directly on the checkout screen. With this option enabled, for patrons that owe bills, instead of going to the checkout screen, they would automatically go to the bill screen. So you could take care of their bills, or at least tell them about their bills before checking things out to them. This next one, uncheck bills by default in the patron billing interface. This means when you go to the billing screen, have nothing selected. It requires the staff user to either click to select all the billings or select them individually. This can be useful if you don't want to have the replacement costs, the costs for items selected by default, and have a more conscious selection of lost items. So this setting, mark item damaged voids overdues. This is a situation where the patron has a book out, it's overdue, so there are fines attached to the transaction, but the book is damaged and the item has to be marked damaged. If you have this set and you mark the item damaged, the overdue fines will be voided. I'm going to use voided there with a caveat, which I'll talk about later. This probably works best if you have the option to charge the item's price when the item is marked damaged. That is also an option, which we'll see later. There's also a void item deposit fee on check-in, which means if you check out an item that is a deposit and the patron has given money for it, that will take away actually, I'm not sure what that option does. It's not something that we use. There are library settings related to the item cost. You can set an option such that the overdue fine will never exceed the cost of the item. So if your item is overdue and the max fine in the circulation rule is $10, but the item only costs $5, Evergreen will stop charging fines when the total is $5. You can also set an option that is a maximum item price or a minimum item price, meaning that patrons will never get charged more than this price or less than this price for a replacement cost. Here's that option I referred to before, to charge the patron the price of the item when the item is marked damaged. Marking damaged also has an optional processing fee, as does when items are marked long overdue or lost. There can be an additional processing fee assessed above the cost of the item. Okay, now we're going to talk about negative balances. So these settings are intended to make Evergreen treat every void as an adjustment. So those places where we saw void in the options, if you enable these settings to prohibit negative balances, instead of voiding those billings, Evergreen will adjust them. It will add those account adjustment payments instead of making the bill like it never happened. And the idea is to eliminate negative balances. We still get a few, but it mostly works. We have been using these options for many years. You can decide that it doesn't matter what kind of bill it is, I never want a negative balance. So yes, prohibit negative balances. Always use that adjustment process instead of voiding. You can have that true only for bills, for lost materials, or you can have that, or you can have it true only for overdue fines. And this interval, what this does is it allows you to set a period of time during which that voiding or adjusting can happen, but beyond which you're not going to remove those bills from the patron. So for example, if you have a lost item for a period of 90 days, that billing can be reversed if the item is returned, but beyond that, it won't be. A few more library settings related to voids. Excuse me. Voids and lost billings. So when an item is marked lost, you can have this option set such that the overdue fines will be voided or adjusted, depending on your negative balance settings, so that the overdue fees go away in favor of the bill for the item. This is an interesting tongue twister. But what this means is if you have an item that was lost and was paid for, and there is no balance owed on it, no matter what happens, if the item comes back, that transaction is not going to change. It's not going to suddenly reappear with a different amount on it. Void loss max interval is another one of those intervals that you can set beyond which you will not remove a bill for a lost item. And these are similar settings. I won't go through them all, but they relate to the long overdue billings. They're very similar to the lost. Not exactly the same, but essentially they serve the same purpose. So the last group of library settings have to do with what to do with overdues when long overdue or lost items are returned. What can happen is you can have the setting to void a long overdue or lost bill when an item's returned. But if that transaction had overdues, those might have been removed when the item was billed. But since the patron actually had the item all this time, you may want to restore those overdues. So essentially, it's just an overdue check-in. This eliminates the problem where the item goes to loss, the overdues are reversed, the lost item is returned, and then the patron owes nothing. So there are options to accommodate that. And this last one here, lost check-in generates new overdues. Say the item was marked lost before it reached its maximum fines. And then the item got returned. The old overdue fines were reinstated, but the patron should have gotten more fines. So this will generate those fines up to the max fine, which the patron would have had. Okay, let's see.
Heads up that we have a couple of minutes left, and we did have a question in chat from Don Dale. Do adjustments leave the bill with a zero balance to prevent a negative balance?
That is the purpose of them. Yes, so if you adjust to zero, you will end up with a negative balance. I'm sorry, you will end up with a zero balance, not a negative balance. That was the whole purpose of that development. It is not perfect. There are still ways that negative balances sneak in, but in general, it prevents negative balances. Okay, so I just have a few more slides about tracking payments. I know we're low on time. So I just wanted to mention cash reports and reports and reporting sources. Cash reports, it's an interface you can go to in the client, and it gives you a quick tally of what you've taken in. So here is an example. It has two tabs. It has desk payments, which means payments where money actually was put in your cash drawer. It tallies cash, check, credit card, if you take them over the desk, and debit card payments. And it has a date range up here, which you can adjust depending on what time period you're looking at. The other tab is the staff user payments, which are the forgive, the work, the goods, which you don't have money for, but it's a way of tracking them. And I just had a slide here, which I'm really not going to talk about much, to show reporting sources that you could report on. Let's see. Okay. I am not a reporter aficionado, but I know these sources can be useful. Okay, that was my last slide, except for my questions and obligatory cat slide. So I'm happy to take questions. I know we're really low on time.
We did have a question from Joanne. When it comes to bills, what is a better setting to use, lost or long overdue?
That really depends on your own library. Long overdue was originally, and I know there are Pines people here that can probably speak to it better than I can, but it was originally created to act pretty much the same way as lost, but to distinguish the bills that were assessed because the item was kept too long versus the bills that were assessed because the patron came in and said, I lost this. So yeah, it really depends on your situation. In our situation, we do some kind of a Frankenstein situation. We do use long overdue to automatically mark items at 42 days, and we do a back-end process to change them to the lost status after a year. Because it does things like hide them from the catalog. It does things that we would like them to do that the long overdue doesn't do. But yeah, it really is a decision for your library and your own policies.
Thank you so much, Michele. We did just get a chat. We are a little past time, but I don't want to cut you off, Michele, if you did want to, but I don't want to make anyone stay either.
Yeah, anybody can feel free to to sign off, but yeah, let me look at Susan's question. We had a situation where a student returned an overdue laptop. When it was checked in, the system indicated a $20 late fee. However, when my coworker scanned the student's ID, their account didn't show any fine, even after refreshing the screen. The fine still didn't appear. When we checked the account on a different computer and the fine was visible there, does it take a minute for the fine to show up? It shouldn't. You might have to refresh the screen or even clear the cache. You said you refreshed the screen. Yeah, I want to blame cache for that. Yes, what Susan said. When in doubt, clear the cache, yes. And when clearing the cache, please make sure you clear cached files only, not cookies or things like that. And clear it for all time. The last hour doesn't often do the trick. A lot of odd behavior after 314. Yeah, clearing cache is never a bad thing. Unless you over clear, so don't do that.